Imagine a world of slow water and long horizons. A land shaped not only by mountains and rivers, but by the patient hands of those who learned to guide the flow. In early China, the great arteries of civilization were not roads of dust or stone, but channels of water stretching for hundreds, and later thousands of miles. Before the coming of the iron plow or the imperial couriers, before cities gleamed with lacquer and silk, there were ditches carved by hand, quiet trenches that caught the rain and turned the fields green. Each channel, each bend, was a conversation with the land, a slow dialogue between people and water. In time, these channels became rivers of human making. The Grand Canal, linking north and south, would stand as one of history's great achievements. Older than most nations and still in use centuries later, but it began, as all vast things do, with individual labor, the steady rhythm of men and women lifting earth, one basket at a time. So tonight, we drift back along these ancient waterways. We'll walk among the canal diggers whose work stitched together the empire. We'll follow the story of the Grand Canal's creation. We'll uncover the faint traces of forgotten roots beneath the soil. And we'll end where water meets power, the calm, enduring flow of human effort beneath the shifting ambitions of emperors. Imagine the morning mist over a wide plain, a place where reeds bend with the slightest breath of air. The sun rises slowly, catching on the surface of shallow pools. From a distance, the faint sound of wooden shovels and rhythmic calls carries over the fields. This is the sound of canal work, steady, unhurried, and ancient. The diggers live in temporary camps along the banks of half-formed channels. Their shelters are simple: mats of straw, low roofs of bamboo, fires burning from damp wood. At dawn, they eat small bowls of millet or rice, washed with warm water. Then they gather their tools, spades with polished handles, baskets woven from reeds, wooden poles to measure depth and distance. They work in lines, one after another, carving through the soil. Some shovel the earth. Others carry it away in baskets balanced across their shoulders. A few set the stones, laying them carefully to form the channel's edge. The rhythm of labor becomes almost musical, the scrape of metal against dirt, a soft slap of bare feet in mud, the creak of water buckets drawn from nearby wells. The overseers pace along the bank, counting the paces between survey markers. They carry rods marked with string, using the sun to judge alignment. Though there is authority here, it is quiet, orders spoken calmly. Progress measured by the slow advance of water through the newly dug trench. As the day warms, the diggers pause to rest in the shade of low trees. They sit silently, wiping sweat with cloths from their sleeves. The conversation is sparse, short exchanges about the depth of the soil or about home, far away in the villages that depend on the water they are shaping now. There is little need for talk. The work itself provides its own language. At the water's edge, some workers smooth the stone linings. The stones come from nearby hills, carried by oxen and men. They are set without mortar, balanced by skill and patience. The touch of their hands leaves faint traces, impressions that might last centuries, hidden beneath flowing water. In the evenings, when the day's labor ends, smoke rises from the camps. The smell of cooking grain drifts across the still air. Tools are cleaned and stacked. Sandals are laid out to dry. A few men repair their baskets or sharpen their blades by firelight. Somewhere someone hums, not a song of joy or sorrow, but simply a rhythm to match the slow pulse of the earth around them. The canal takes shape almost imperceptibly. A week passes, and the line of the trench grows longer. Another month, and the first trickle of water finds its way through. The diggers watch it move, a silver thread winding across the plain, and there is quiet satisfaction in the sight. It is not triumph or celebration, only a calm acknowledgement that the work continues. In this life of measured effort, time moves differently. The seasons themselves are markers, the soft rains that fill the channels, the heat that dries the earth and cracks the banks, the chill winds that freeze the shallows at dawn. The diggers adjust to each change, their lives bound to the same rhythms as the water they guide. Even when they sleep, the sound of the canal remains a faint trickle, a whisper of movement in the dark. It is said that those who work beside the water begin to dream of it, not of the labor, but of the steady, endless flow. When the canal diggers of the early dynasties worked beneath the sun, they could not have known how their quiet labor would one day grow into something monumental. A single, continuous artery binding the far corners of an empire. The Grand Canal, as it came to be known, was not built in a single lifetime. It was a work of centuries, the slow accumulation of vision, persistence, and sheer human endurance. But it was under the Sui dynasty, more than 1,000 years ago, that it first took its vast and lasting form. Imagine the year 605, under the rule of Emperor Yang of Sui. The empire stretched far and wide, but its lands were unevenly blessed. The north held the seat of power, but the south produced the grain. The emperor, ambitious and determined to unify the empire's lifeblood, ordered that water should connect his dominion from the fertile fields of the Yangtze River basin to the distant northern plains near the capital at Luoyang. The project began with a sound that must have echoed across valleys and fields: the low thud of picks against soil, the groan of oxen, the slow rhythm of thousands of laborers at work. Some came willingly, skilled in earthwork and hydrology. Others were conscripted from villages, leaving their homes for years on end. Yet whatever their reason, they became part of the same immense living machine, one that turned the empire's geography into a network of flowing trade and movement. Historical records describe how Emperor Yang himself traveled along parts of the canal as it was built, carried by grand barges lined with silken banners. But beneath the ornate displays of imperial pride was the quiet mastery of engineers and craftsmen. They measured gradients by hand, using water-filled tubes and weighted lines. The canals had to flow just enough to move ships, but not so fast as to erode their banks. The balance between stillness and motion was everything. Stone locks were set where the land rose, and wooden gates were designed to control water levels. The great junctions near the Yellow River and Yi River required ingenious diversions and channels, feats that even today would challenge modern minds. Each section of the canal had its own name, its own character, shaped by the landscape it crossed. The Yangtze Canal, the Tanji Canal, the Jiangnan Canal. Together they formed a single continuous thread over 1,700 kilometers of flowing connection. Along its banks, new towns appeared. Markets formed where none had been before. Farmers found new ways to send their grain north, and officials found new ways to bring taxes south. What had once been an empire divided by distance began to move with a single rhythm. Boats carried silk, salt, and rice. Messengers brought news and orders. The empire became, in a sense, alive with motion. But even as the emperor admired his achievement, the cost was high. Thousands of workers perished from exhaustion, floods, and famine during its construction. The official chronicles are restrained, but they hint at the scale of sacrifice. Fields left untended, families displaced, and yet the canal endured. Long after the Sui dynasty had fallen, its waters continued to flow, feeding trade, supporting cities, and shaping the geography of Chinese civilization for centuries. To drift along the canal today is to follow the same curves and crossings that men and women once carved by hand. The water reflects new bridges and new cities. But beneath the surface lies the memory of the first channels, the marks of wooden shovels, the traces of calloused hands. From the grand vision of the Sui emperors, story now turns to the quiet persistence of time itself, to what remains buried and forgotten, where the canals once ran before being lost to the earth. In some places, the old canals are hidden, covered by farmland, swallowed by reeds, or filled by centuries of silt. Their lines still trace the landscape, faint shadows visible only from above. In recent years, archaeologists and historians have begun to rediscover them using maps, cords, and satellite images to find where ancient water once flowed. From the air, the land tells its secrets. Patterns emerge, long, pale scars through the soil, subtle shifts in vegetation that reveal the path of forgotten water. Some of these traces belong to minor channels used for irrigation or transport. Others are remnants of the first great projects, linking one river basin to another long before the Grand Canal was completed. Excavations sometimes reveal fragments of pottery, rusted tools, or the stumps of wooden piers. In the north, where the ground freezes deep, archaeologists have uncovered sections of embankment built from layered reeds and clay, preserved like pages in a book. The ancient builders reinforced their canals with woven mats and stones, materials chosen not only for strength but for their relationship to the earth itself. Clay for sealing, reeds for flexibility, stones for permanence. There is also the quiet mystery of the maintenance tunnels. Narrow passageways dug beside some stretches of canal used to manage water flow or store tools. In some cases, these tunnels have collapsed, leaving hollow echoes beneath the surface. In others, they remain sealed and silent, their entrances forgotten beneath centuries of cultivation. The workers who once passed through them carried lanterns made of oiled paper, their flickering light casting long shadows against damp walls. Few words were spoken. The sound of dripping water was constant, patient, unchanging. And then there are the canals that no longer flow, the ghost rivers of history. During times of war or neglect, sections were abandoned, rerouted, or filled in. Villages grew over them. In some areas, what appears to be a gentle rise in the field is, in truth, the buried embankment of an ancient canal. In others, a grove of willows marks the line where water once moved. These quiet remnants remind us how human effort fades, yet never fully disappears. The land keeps a memory of every channel. From these buried waterways, the story rises once more toward the living surface, to where water continues to shape not only the land, but also the lives and hierarchies that have always gathered beside it. Beside the canals, life was humble and enduring. Fishermen cast nets in the dawn light. Families gathered water in clay jars. Bargemen pushed their long poles against the riverbed, their songs low and rhythmic, almost blending with the sound of flowing water. These were lives lived close to the earth, practical, necessary, and bound by routine. Yet above this quiet labor stood the figures of power. Emperors, governors, merchants, and officials, all drawn to the canal's utility. To them, it was not a place of toil, but a symbol of order and control. The emperor could send grain from one end of the empire to the other, maintain his armies, and collect his taxes, all by the slow, obedient motion of water. The canal was both a lifeline and an instrument of governance. Sometimes imperial boats would pass the villages of the laborers. Grand vessels carved and painted, their hulls gleaming with lacquer. On the decks, attendants in silk robes watched the landscape drift by, fields, bridges, and workmen knee-deep in the shallows. For a moment, two worlds shared the same water, the world of the ruler and the world of those who built his path. And yet the canal equalized in its own way. Whether emperor or worker, noble or merchant, all were bound by its rhythm. The slow current dictated the pace of travel. The rise and fall of the water determined when one could move or must wait. The canal, in its quiet authority, cared nothing for rank. As centuries passed, new dynasties rose and fell, but the canal remained. It outlasted rulers, wars, and revolutions. Even today, sections of the Grand Canal still carry barges of grain and goods, their wakes spreading softly across the same waters, first dug by hands long vanished. The story of the canal diggers is not one of glory or conquest, but of persistence. Their work flowed unseen, yet it sustained an empire. The canals they shaped were not monuments of stone or gold, but of movement, the gentle, continuous motion that connects people across time and distance. If you listen closely, perhaps you can still imagine it. The soft splash of a pole in the water, the whisper of wind through reeds, the quiet echo of shovels beneath the sun. The sound fades but never truly ends. Like water, it returns again and again, following its ancient path toward the sea.